All right, end of Disrupt. Let's go. So a year ago, I think it would have been too early to have a panel like this at Disrupt because we knew that generative AI was getting good, but it wasn't quite there yet. We still were like, well, look at the fingers. But a year later, we've made so much progress, and I wanted to start with Mikey. When we were talking last week, you mentioned that you were a visitor at a songwriting class at Berklee College of Music, which, as the CEO of a Gen AI music company, you would think they might be a little worried about the impact of AI. So when you went into that class, what was your approach? What did you say to win them over?
I think, let me say two things there. The first thing is, it sounds like walking into the lion's den, and I'll say that I'm very lucky to have friends at Berklee, including the professor of that class, who had everybody use our product to make a song with someone who is not a traditional music maker. Yeah. And student after student is describing how the experience of making a song, let's say with your mom or your neighbor, was so moving, and they all end up in tears. I think there's something very special about music, that it brings people together. I think honestly the approach of just walking in there and just saying like, don't worry, there's no disruption here, everything is fine, is probably not the right approach. And it's to talk to people and hear people out. But ultimately, for example, for songwriting, which you think is maybe the first thing that's going to get in trouble, and then you have a room full of students who realizes that like, this is a tool where I can get more music out there, I can go more direct, maybe I can actually fancy myself an electronic artist because of the music that I write, and you realize that it's actually quite an empowering tool viewed in a slightly different light.
Maybe I'll add something to that. So I'm Kakul, I'm the CEO of Splice. We are the largest player in the samples space. So we're a subscription company, and we provide building blocks, the little Lego building blocks of sound for people to create music on. We've been around for about 10 years. So we have been in the classroom for a long time, working with students, working with creators, working with creative professionals and teachers, because we've been such a core part of how music is created today. Over the last couple of years, we've launched these new AI-based tools that really help our customers and these students take their craft to the next level. So Amanda, when we go into the classroom, what we get really excited about is how much these students are eager to explore, and I'm sure you've seen this as well. They are ready to disrupt their own industry, and they're really interested in seeing where this work will go. I'm sure we're seeing this in the video space as well, but young people are really the people who are taking this to the next level.
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting, nuanced space because, as I had mentioned to you guys when we talked before, I worked with students on smartphone filmmaking in a past job, and these were students who wouldn't have had access to camera equipment, but look at all the iPhones in the crowd. These phones are really good at taking pictures and taking video, and these kids that wouldn't have otherwise had film equipment were able to make films, and I think that's really artistically and creatively and intellectually empowering. But then on the other hand, I'm sure there's been a lot of times when somebody would have hired a professional photographer for some event, and then they're like, well, we have iPhones, so whatever. So how do you kind of think through these intricacies of how AI tools can help people be more creative, but also does this impact artists?
I think, hello, by the way, my name is Amit. And we're building visual generative models at Luma. So very relevant. It's very interesting. Before iPhones, not many photos were taken, right? Very few moments were documented. We had flip books, my parents actually still to this day have photo books where all our memories are stored, but they're very far and in between. Those were definitely taken by photographers. So Yes, you're right that there must have been events where it could have been a professional photographer who would have come in and took those photos. But the flip side of that is the entirety of humanity, our visual memories are now preserved in our camera rolls. In fact, there are so many photos in our camera rolls that every OS company like Apple or Google have to build features in your camera app to surface memories so you don't forget the photos you took and keep using their camera and keep using their service. That, I think, is extremely powerful, right? Like, because that is the promise of technology. Technology is not done, or any technological arc is not done until it is in the hands of literally every person, right? So television, when it was only a big stage where you had to go and sit down and watch it in theater, that was the start, right? Before that, entertainment was actually only in big courts, and you had to be a king to have access to entertainment, and everything else was, you were just bored out of your mind for all your life. We finished that arc, and now it's in every person's pocket. With generative art, with generative AI, with what it enables, that will be the finishing of this arc. It will be so that some people who would have been hired to do some job that is today will not be hired to do that. But I think those people who have taste and who have skills will be able to do so much more and will be able to do make actually insane things that today they can't. So that's my thought.
I actually love what you just said. Those who have taste and those who have skill will be able to do amazing things. And Amanda, the students that you're talking about, they don't have access to the best cameras. Once upon a time, film was expensive. I'm an immigrant to this country. When my family was in India, buying film was an expensive thing. So it was a big deal when we were going to get a photo taken, right? Everyone would line up and put on their nice clothes, and we'd all set up a certain way. And that meant that if there was a kid in the family who wanted to create art, truly create art, that was a very expensive thing for them to take risks on. But now that same kid can be extremely experimental. And so yes, maybe there will be jobs lost, but I actually think that there will be more art created because more of us will have the ability to bring that truth out to life. I think it's so important.
Maybe I can just add also at the end of that arc that you're talking about, where it's in everybody's hands, people appreciate that medium so much more than they used to, right? I think, I think about this, I challenge somebody to tell me that photography is somehow less valuable now than it was 50 years ago. That's an absurd statement to say, and it's because everybody, having tried to take pictures with their iPhone and seen what works and doesn't work, actually makes you appreciate it more. Right? And so it's not just that putting it in more people's hands makes it more ubiquitous. It actually makes it more valuable to each individual person by doing that.
And the photography example is actually really, really interesting because think about if you know Austin Mann. He always takes photos with the iPhone, and then Apple features their photos in launch materials, basically. They're Austin Mann's photos. I actually cannot take the photos that Austin Mann takes. It's literally the same camera I have. So there's that. The human skill and human endeavor still basically makes the gap. We will build tools. We will build extremely capable models, extremely capable technologies that come on top of it. But skill and taste will still be the thing that differentiates the best of us from the rest of us. And people have always found that I actually don't understand why generative AI is any different in that regard from all of previous technologies. But finishing the thought on completing the arc, there's a second bit to it, which is that when these technologies become personal, people start to use them for a lot of things that you would just not imagine, right? Would you ever hire a photographer to take a photo of, the pillar where you parked your car to remember where it was, right? It just doesn't work like that. Now, is it art? I don't give a shit. It's extremely useful. It's extremely valuable to us, and I think this is where we're going to go with generative AI, and the impact will be way bigger than what we have seen with other things.
Yeah, and I also want to talk about the way that these models are trained, which LLMs require vast amounts of human-created art, and there's a lot of controversy over web scraping and how things on the internet just end up in these data sets. For example, not to get meta, that's not a joke about the company Meta. Like we have Getty photographers here and other publications, if they want to write an article about Suno and they're like, here's this great picture of Mikey that comes from the Getty photographers, they have to license that and then they can put it on their website. But people think that because something on the internet is there, that it is automatically like you can share it because it's on the internet. So how do you like navigate that issue of training your models at your respective companies?
Maybe I'll start with that. It's actually something we take incredibly seriously. Splice has a library of over 2 million sounds, samples, and we've worked with artists all over the world to put that catalog together. We have relationships with every single one of those artists, and that is what we're training our material on. And I think it's really, really, really important to respect the creators and to respect the people who are making this content. As Amit was saying, it takes great craft. To the sound designers, the musicians all over the world, they have worked on their craft, so we feel like it's really, really important to respect that. But it's not a new problem, Amanda, and I think that's really important. So one of my early career moves was I was at Flickr. And at Flickr, we would talk about how we were the eyes of the world. We had people taking photos and sharing them on Flickr. It was very important for us to use tools like making sure that people had rights to all of their images, even though they were shared publicly on the web. And I think we need to continue to have that as a responsibility for companies building AI-based tools to respect that.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add to that. I do have to be somewhat careful with what I say here, but it is not a new thing at all, but also specifically for AI, wildly early in where all of this goes. And I think we should, I wish I could show everybody what my inbox looks like of users of ours who just ask actually really interesting and difficult questions around like, what is the copyright associated with the song that I made on Suno? And for many of them, the answer is, I actually don't know, I'm really sorry. So I think, I guess with disruption, I suppose comes the need for some amount of patience for exactly how to figure some of these things out.
And what is it like for you when, I know recently Timbaland joined as a strategic advisor to Suno. So what do you learn from people like Timbaland about how to make a Gen AI music startup and also honor the work of artists? Yeah,
I'll say a couple things here. First, it's fairly humbling to get to work with him. I think, on some level, I'll say this, there are a lot of artists who use Suno, some of them publicly and some of them less publicly, right? And I think it's amazing to have someone like Tim who is, let's say, doesn't necessarily have much to prove and who can be a little more public about it. I think he is one of the most forward-leaning and especially with respect to technology producers. And so we are just constantly learning from him. Like people think, for example, that I am the best user of our product. I am so far from the best user of our product. It's like, maybe 6 months ago we would learn the most from just talking to people in our Discord, and now, basically climbing and getting to see what the creme de la creme of music producers, how they use Suno. It's amazing.
I can tell you a little bit about video side of the world in the same way. We did this Generative AI festival in Culver City recently with Amazon, some of our partners. And there were some actually, actual real directors there. In addition to people who are really enthusiastic about AI and experimenting with it and making a lot of things with it. I think this idea that somehow by using a particular kind of technology, you're disrespecting previous things or disrespecting people who don't use it, I think that's silly. That's entirely I don't even understand how that's coming about. It might be a little bit protectionist, honestly, from some people who do not want to use the next thing. But long story short on that, like, to your question, how do you balance the creative art or like the creative pursuits that people have and the skills that they have built over time with, like, oh, this thing can actually just make the thing. I come back to, it's like a broken record. I come back to it. People who have skills and taste will still be able to make the kind of things that capture hearts and imaginations. And as you're saying, literally the same model in my hands, and I can't make anything that looks half as decent as what, like, our users do. It's again a matter of, like, skill and taste. So where does it come down to is there's two people, both have skill and taste. One of them is extremely reluctant and dogmatic about, oh, I'm not going to use this particular technology, I'm going to use this particular technology. Their work will reflect that. And others who embrace and just evolve with, like, how if there are better tools, if there's something that is better suited to what they're trying to make, they will do better. So I think this is how generally the tide will shift. Yeah, that's my thoughts.
Maybe I'll just add something to that. Well, I actually think, Amanda, there are two parts to your question, and they both are really, really important. One is what we've been talking about, right? Like, we're working on tools for creative people. So creative people will always take the technology to places that you have never imagined as a creator. In the tech world, we think about, software developers as hackers. Musicians are hackers, and the best musicians will use whatever tool, as Amit is saying, whatever tool it takes to get their truth out. And we're very lucky at Splice that all the top creators use Splice. There were stories constantly about how Splice samples ended up in popular music. I will say that there's a different question here as well, which is around rights. And I think it's extremely important for top producers, top creators, whether on the film side, the audio side, or photography side, to feel like if I'm putting my art out there, that I have rights to that content. And that's really clean. So I don't think we can overlook that part of it. I think it's really important.
And for each of your companies, what does your user base look like? Is this mostly hobbyists? Are these professionals?
Sorry, yeah, I can go first. For us, I think it's a little bit different. Yes, there are professionals. Some of them even like Tim, who are the top of their game. But most of our users are just, average people who have never made music before. And I think the thing that, at least for me, is really special about music is that everybody has tastes in music. It's like part of every culture. It is like, and I think humans have really evolved to want to do it. And so. It may not look like it on its face, but ours is like really meant for literally everybody.
Yeah, our user base is very, very interesting. Of course, it includes people who are making videos for a living, who are being paid to do that, who have contracts, those kind of things. So professionals, semi-professionals, whatever you would want to call them. But there's also a huge group of people who you would not expect to be using these kind of tools. So this includes people who work in fashion, for instance, and their intention is not to make a video so that they can show it to someone, but rather to see how their work actually looks on different kind of people, to see how a fabric flows, to see how it would look like in different weather conditions, these kind of things. Now this is entirely unintended use cases, but that actually also tells you what happens when you democratize really, really powerful technology. You start to find, because it's so easy and because it's so cheap, like video production, hundreds of thousands of dollars very easily. Like we're producing a launch video right now. A majority of it is going to be made in Dream Machine, obviously. But yeah, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So most people will never attempt it. But when you make it dirt cheap, right? Like, when you make it so that it's in pennies that it takes to experiment with it, you see new use cases for it. We also see a lot of students, and I don't mean film students. We see a lot of students who want to visualize an idea, visualize a concept, and they come and ask our model how to do that. Our model currently does not do a terribly good job at it, to be honest with you, and we're working on it because we just discovered that this is something that people are trying to do. So our user base, yes, there's a lot of studios and a lot of professionals who are using it, and that's about 34, 35%. And then rest of the user base that is paying, is paying because they want to just endlessly explore this visual medium. There's also a lot of people who do it because it feels therapeutic for them. They want to see what is in their head. And actually, honestly, that is my personal use case. I'm extremely visual as a thinker. And I know a lot of people say that, like, for me, like, if I can't visualize something, I can't remember it. I can't process it. And it's a huge deficiency or an capability, however you want to think it. There was an internet debate about word cells versus shape rotators. Very much a shape rotator. And for me, this is one of the most important use cases where if I can just see what is in my head and show someone else, huge unlock. So.
Yeah, I love that example of new use cases being developed. So our customer base are people who care deeply about the music that they're creating. And so it's a lot of producers, a lot of professionals, but it's a lot of people who are just passionate about their craft. So I'll give you a story of one user I met recently, actually a couple of days ago, and he's actually a software developer, he's a coder, and he has built, created music for over 20 years. And he has a goal for himself that every year he is going to at least ship one project that is a musical project out to Spotify or something like that. And he spends many hours on this work. And he was using Splice and our AI-based tools for that. And he usually works in ambient / EDM kind of music space. And he hit a different button and it gave him more of a lo-fi, hip hop kind of energy. And he was like, I didn't know I could create in this way. And this idea of AI enabling people to create in ways that they couldn't imagine for themselves, I think is pretty powerful.
I mentioned at the top that it felt like a year ago, if we had a panel like this, the scene would look so much different. A year from now, where do you think we'll be and what sort of things will we be talking about?
Yeah, the rate of progress is astonishing. And we spent the last couple of years, basically, we as in Luma, but we also as in an industry, basically getting the building blocks in place, right? Getting the GPUs, getting them to train very efficiently, getting all the data to be very clean, figuring out what works, what does not work. By the way, training these models, pretty much alchemy. It's an empirical science. That's the way to think about it. We discard more models than we ship because they just collapsed. They didn't work out. But with each iteration, our success rate improves significantly, and what we are able to achieve, our ambition actually expands. But that also means what the models are going to be able to do. Like right now, video models look like clip generators, right? Suno just shipped like whole song generation, which is amazing. But before that, it was like, you generate a little song and it just terminates, right there. They look like, it was funny to even call them tools, right? And that this is, I'm just talking about 2024. In video space, basically, in language model, you call it logical consistency, where one sentence, how does it relate to the second sentence, how does it relate to the third sentence? In video, it's a much harder problem. You need to make sure causality is respected. If event X happened at time T1, it has effects that go further out into the video. So your models need to be extremely intelligent. So from our side, if I'm thinking about this, not only are models going to get really good at high fidelity video production, but at that point we have just displaced or we have built a good stock art generator, but now stock art is custom. But that's not the end goal. The end goal would be, or the second goal would be, how can we make what these models produce very intelligent and closer to the intent of the person of what they're trying to do, right? So you don't say a guy walking on the beach petting a turtle, right? No, you say story of a guy becoming friends with the turtle. And you want to be able to see the full arc play out. You want to be able to see the arc of a physical phenomena play out. You want to be able to see the arc of a whole fashion show play out. So, that's the next stage. And it will take less time than people think. It will go much further than people think. And it's going to be a very fun time.
I think about this, I agree with all of that. When we think very hard about okay, a year from now, I think it's very hard for people to appreciate just how much content will exist, just because we've made it so easy, intuitive, actually fun in most of these cases to create content. and eventually cheap, hopefully. I think that to me is like the biggest paradigm shift out there. And if there is so much more content out there, lots of things become really important. Your ability to find it, your ability to get recommended it, your ability to create it. I think about like potentially new economic models that have to exist because of the abundance of content here. And I think it's very hard for us, like you said, it's very hard for us to actually think about just how good these models will get. I think the flip side is actually very hard to think about our reaction to the overabundance of this content.
I mean, I think you're describing AI slop right now.
Not only slop though. It's like imagine, right? Fast forward. These things are going to be really, really good. Like we collect tons of preference data. Our ability to generate songs that are actually very good just keeps getting better and better. And so it's not slop, but it's like I can hyper tailor content for exactly this case or this case. And you've made it from a search problem over this vast universe to a very different kind of generation problem. I think, like all other media, in aggregate, each individual piece of content gets very cheap, but the medium as a whole gets way, way more valuable to people.
And I think if you take the limit of that idea, it basically just means that you would have personal content that was generated just for you, probably by you, or probably by someone else, and then maybe with the audience of two. And that changes really the dynamics of we don't have to make mass appealing tracks or mass appealing videos that are just the lowest common denominator and they will appeal to literally everyone on the planet, right? We can make super niche stories. We can make things that are just really entertaining and really funny to one person or one group of friends. It's about an inside joke, or it's about something that they identify with, but no one else has to identify with. And yeah, there will be new economic models that have to come about of how it is consumed. How do they share? How do you find the other group of friends across the country or across the world that also will find it interesting? Yeah, it's going to be fun.
So maybe I'll just add to that. I don't think this is a new problem, right? This is not a problem that AI is creating. iPhone's created this problem where we have so much content out there. And yes, you've got memes that are big, and then you've got personal memes as well. I think all of those things will continue to exist next year, just like they existed 5 years ago and existed 10 years before that. So I think a lot of AI accelerates some of that, but it doesn't actually change the core premise that there's so much more content out there than we can possibly consume, right? Like Spotify has enough songs that more than you can hear in a lifetime. And so you just kind of run out of that bandwidth. And I agree that marketplace dynamic will increase better content to the top. And the better content, by the way, will not be high fidelity content. It'll be content that connects with us emotionally. And I think that's a really, really important thing to understand. I think the other thing that will happen is we will have AI slop. We will have a lot of really terrible stuff out there that is dangerous, that is hurtful to young people. I think that you will see a lot of that happen. That happens with every technology. And I think that creates an environment where I hope that us here and many of you in the audience are actually trying to build responsible technology, whether that comes from a rights perspective, whether that comes from a creator and human, creator perspective, or whether that comes from actually making useful technology as opposed to throwaway experiences for people. I think it's really important, and I think we have a responsibility.
Great. I think that's a great note to end on. So thank you to our panelists. Thank you to the audience. Have a good end of your Disrupt.